Hi, we've got a bit of an exciting tasting today. I recently was able to pick up the Buffalo Trace Kosher collection. So here we have the rye, the straight rye, and the wheat. And in doing so, picking those up, I thought it was a good opportunity to talk a little bit about what they were and that they maybe go under the radar a little bit. People don't know what they are. So effectively, they are the same mash bill, the same grains that go into usual Buffalo Trace products. So for the rye recipe, you're looking at mash bill ones. For the rye recipe, or the straight rye, sorry, you're looking at the same one that's going into the Sazracs, the W.R. Weller. And for the wheat recipes, you're looking at the straight Weller wheated range. So it's a bit of an interesting opportunity if you can't get a hold of some of the other regular BTAC or Buffalo Trace. Sorry, not BTAC, Buffalo Trace collection. BTAC would be great. If you can't get a hold of some of those other Buffalo Trace options, then you may see this on the shelf, not know what it is. So I thought I would talk a little bit about what that is and then see how it compares in a bit of a fun blind as well. So even though it should be the same as the standard, you would think that the Kosher the Rye recipe, that's supposed to match up against a Buffalo Trace. However, it comes up with a little bit of a higher proof. So the proof on this is 47%. So you get that as a bit of a higher proof, just given that it's running out of a smaller batch. And the reason that it is kosher, it's got to do with the Passover. So during Passover, in order to make sure that it is still kind of kosher, even though it's not kosher for Passover, they actually hand over to a non-Jewish executive in a bit of a ceremony. They look after the grains and the barrels and the special barrels that are for these batches, and that just kind of gets around some of that aspect. I'm not Jewish, so I don't really know too much about it. But just as to say that they kind of, it's a nice option that they've got. For the rest of us, though, that means that you're effectively getting the same product with a different label. And we're going to see how true that is and see how it stacks up. And I just thought it would be fun just to give that in a comparison to the rest of the lineup. Now, I do also have, though, for the comparison, a single barrel pick. Now, this comes in at 45%, which is a little bit stronger than a normal Buffalo Trace. So that should give a much closer comparison to see if I can pick the Buffalo Trace and the Kosher. My wife has already separated all of the bottles out, all the pours out here. So I don't actually know what is in what. So it does in itself come in as a bit of a blind tasting. I'm going to take a bit of maybe an hour and a half break between doing that. Then I'm going to look at the straight rye versus the Sazrac, and then the Kosher versus the Weller Special Reserve. That's the only Weller I have. So it's the only one I can compare it to. But just to see, you know, what do I feel comes out better. So without further ado, let's start going through these. I'm just going to nose along them and okay. So I've also got the good old Eagle Rare in here, which will be interesting to see how some of that aging stacks up. I just want to nose through them all first, just to see if I pick up anything between the color, between the nose. These middle two immediately seem a lot lighter. This first one comes in a little sweeter, and the last one here that's interesting. That's a bit softer, but it's a lot deeper. So it comes in light, but actually has a much more like balanced, deep scent once you get into it. So let's have a taste of this first one. It's light. There's a little burn on it, on that front. It drops off a little quickly, but it's still quite nice. I would imagine maybe that's one of the two classics here. It's sort of a little lacking at the back end. So this is going to be a bit of a review of my my Buffalo Trace thoughts. So something it just drops off at the end there that I just would like to see something develop through a little bit more. Maybe it's because it's quite young or needs some aging. The age statement on this one, I don't think it has one from memory. Just 94 proof, so I guess it could be minimum of 2 years. Yeah, no age statement on that. There's no burn or spice to the front of that whatsoever. It's a little more oily. That comes through a lot smoother, but just flows straight through. Like doesn't bring a whole lot of character through the mid-range. Very, very nice on the first sip, but I mean that's quite easy drinking. That's I can't pick that yet as to what that is, because it stays at the same level. Like quite often you have one and it will start really spicy and then it will drop out and then it will have kind of like nothing at the end of it, or it'll start spicy and pick up and then you'll get this nice like aftertaste that ramps up through the end. That one starts soft and just kind of stays there and just drops. So it doesn't have a lot of peak and trough to the flavor profile. I'm wondering how much this will teach me about my my flavorings as well. That's similar. I get a little bit of grassiness in that. Very similar to the last one. So I still think that may be these two. That's very similar in that it's got a little bit more on it. There's a little bit more character to this than this one, but very, very similar. Yeah, in the two of them. And currently I would be putting these two maybe at a B tier. This one's at least interesting. I want to come back to this for a second. This comes in with some spice and some character. I think it drops off. So I would want more from it, but it's definitely got a lot of character and play. Brings a little bit more to it. So I'm wondering what that is. I would imagine that these will be because of similarities, that's going to be these two. I think that the one on the left here is going to be the kosher, just on the basis of it just had the slightest more punch that may come through the proof and a little bit of extra character. Although one's a single barrel, so the single barrel pick may be what's giving that character. And this one The fact that it's smooth at the start, when I smelled this, I had Eagle Rare vibes. A lifting character through the middle, no burn, a nice oakiness. Caramel. I would really be surprised if that wasn't Eagle Rare. So how would I rate these out? Again, I'm going to go 1, 2. Or do I want to? 3, 4, maybe, just for the character of this. But I'm now going to check. My wife has taken a picture of what they were. I'll throw that down the bottom, like here, and see how that lines up. So I'm going to put these bottles behind where I think they are. It does not represent the ratings of them, but just so that we can kind of like visually see what I think the order is. Well, now isn't this interesting? I've got this wrong, and quite funnily so, because the kosher is actually reversed here, and this is the actual order. So I find that really surprising, because I didn't think that the kosher would be miles different. Being from the same mash bill and being from a smaller batch, but it's got a lot more spiciness and stuff up front. So it genuinely really is. And I guess that this being a single pick and the Taylor's being so it's like a 47 versus 50%. That's why these two have come in fairly close to each other, and being fairly similar. And then the Eagle Rare obviously pick that is a standout on its own. But really quite interesting. I didn't think that like grabbing this was going to be a huge difference. I got it just more for the process of making sure that I kind of like got that chance to taste it and see what the full range would be like. But I think that that's genuinely a different offering. I would be less stressed. I mean, always good to have a single barrel, but if you've got a single barrel or an E.H. Taylor, like they're very similar that there's very little extra to bring in between them. But that kosher generally gives a bit of spice up front that I just wasn't getting from these other two. Again, it drops out quite quickly. It's definitely not to that top end, but it does leave me excited for what's going to happen at the back end of this. I'm going to give myself some time to recharge out, so to speak. Whew. Okay, so it is getting hot this afternoon. Anyway, to close this off, we have the kosher straight rye. So this is going to be matching against the Sazrac rye and the WL Weller mash bills. And then you have the wheat recipe. That's going to be the same mash bill as your Wellers. Again, I only have the Weller Special Reserve. So for this, I'm not doing these blind. And I'm not going to do massive pours on that Special Reserve Weller because it's not fantastic. And this should be enough to see how this, how these two compare. So it's going to be very interesting to see what I get off the end. Now, I might start with the Special Reserve to give me a base, because you would expect that this would come in at that Special Reserve entry range. 94 proof again, whereas the Weller Special Reserve is 90 proof. So you're getting a little bit more proof. The Weller Special Reserve. I mean, it's got heat on the front end of it. It comes with a little bit creaminess, and that back end that I'm always looking for with the Weller Special just drops so dramatically. If you didn't know, my thoughts on Weller Special Reserves are probably very clear by now. I think it's a great drink with potential, but it just doesn't ever hit the mark, and I always find myself just a little bit disappointed when I try it for the potential of what it could be, because it smells like it could have something there. But when you get into that pour, it just starts a little harsh and just finishes a little empty. So I'm just going to see how that switches over to the... Oh. That's very different. Very different. This smells more like what I would remember an Antique 107 to smell like. It's got a lot of that caramel and like stronger caramel and like fruitiness in it. It's a little more oily as well. It's got some mids. I got an immediate little pickup of heat right at first, but it went away really quite quickly. And that leaves a bit of spice now. Well, that's quite interesting. That's a lot better than the Special Reserve. Markable difference. Oh, the aftertaste that I'm getting off this as well gives a really nice butterscotchy, like moreish, like I like that. I've just had something tasty. I want to have a little bit more. There's still room for some character development in there. I don't think it's hits those like lofty heights of, you know, some of those really fantastic pours. But I mean, this was, I think you get it somewhere between 43, I think is the lowest I've seen it, and about 50 pounds. Work that out in the US, no idea. I'll probably put it on screen. But for that, this is impossible to get your hands on almost. Even over here in the UK, they're just, and for not that good of a pour. Whereas, I mean, I've seen many of these kicking around, and that's not that difficult to get your hands on. I really like that. That's yeah, that's fantastic. Again, in my heart, I mean, I love a Weller 107. I don't see that getting there. But it's better than a couple of the other Wellers that I've done on tastings before. So I'd say it's better than a Weller 12 year. Doesn't come in so aggressively. I think that that's going to be much more friendly to a newer palate as well. Interesting. So we're going to leave those, and these are both fresh pours as well, and we're going to see what the difference is on the rise. I probably could have let them like air out and sit for a minute. So these are all except for this, these were all neck pours. The original, this was a neck pour. The Eagle Rare, technically not a neck pour, near enough to though. And the rye was, so they're at least mostly competing on the same field. So the Sazrac rye, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for and always quite enjoyed, for like a fantastic value. Like, I mean, I think I picked up mine for like 23, 24 pounds at a local supermarket. I just went in one day and it was there and I was like, oh, easy pickup. So much spice at the front. A little bitterness, actually. Quite a lot of it, actually, even a little sour. But I do know it makes a great old-fashioned. So a little bitter, a little sour. And I'm looking at the colour between the two of these. And, I mean, even on the camera you can see that. There's a big colour difference. So I'd say that the kosher is spending a little bit more time in the barrels, or picking up a little bit more flavour. Let's see. There's a little ethanol on the nose, but not a load. And it comes in a little herby. Spice. You know, typical rye there. Flattens out really quickly, actually. Comes in like very solid, drops, peters out. Almost no aftertaste. Nothing lingering. Well, that's actually a little disappointing. I wonder if this is going to open up a little bit. The initial taste is great. Really complex, nice spice. Not getting the kind of lower sour notes that I was getting here. But even now, the aftertaste just drops away really quickly. If I looked at the wheat recipe, the aftertaste really lingered for a long time and gave you a really nice kind of like creamy butterscotch sweetness, whereas on the straight rye, it comes in with a punch of flavour. Second or 2 seconds later, it's gone. And that's a little lacking for me. I like something that lingers just a little bit longer. So I would have to say, I mean, the kosher offerings over the basics are a much better offering, and I think much better value for money. And I think they're a great pickup. I do not think that they're top level, but they're definitely a good mid slot of the offering. And quite interestingly, they do give a different taste and a different offering. My pick of the bunch is actually going to be this rye recipe. I was so surprised by that, and I mean, maybe I'm a bit more of a bourbon man. I thought that was really, really good. That rye recipe was fantastic. It offered something different, even in amongst that category where mash bill 1 is already so heavily populated. The wheat recipe would be my second pickup. Actually, I think that if you can't get a hold of a Weller, or even if you can only get a hold of a Weller Special Reserve or a Weller 12, pick up this. I mean, it's probably going to be a lot easier to get your hands on. It might only come out a few times per year, so it might be a seasonal thing, but I've certainly not seen any difficulty getting it. The straight rye, I'll have to leave it to a rye drinker to tell me on that. I'm going to send out a couple of samples to some people from the British Bourbon Society, but if you're interested and you haven't had one of these, this is why this is looking weird to me. I put these corks on the wrong one. Leave a comment if you're in the UK. If you want to get your hands on a try, I usually have a few tastings with me, like kicking around. If I see you at an event or something and we're going to be there, never know. Could get a couple going your way. Anyway, cheers.